Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf tzadik bet. We are near the.
Rashi today?
We're gonna, I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. We may. The stories are sufficiently straightforward, at least from my perspective, for the perspective of Daf Yomi, that we may not have any Rashi, but we do have great cases, and we're going to have winners and we're going to have losers. So let's take a look. So we are beginning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up, and we're dealing with a number of interesting cases. Okay, so here's the next case. So middle of the line, Hahu Gavra. So let me see. So we're right over right here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Hahu Gavra Dizavna Luxubasa Ime Betovas Hana. So we have again. So the ksuba is the right to get paid if the husband dies first or if he divorces her, and the son. This, the son of the wife, the son of the couple, presumably, says, you know what? I'm going to sell my wife's, the right that I have in my mom's ksuva to somebody else for, not a lot. Because, of course, first of all, the husband has to die first, or he has to divorce her. Then my mom has to die, and only then do I get it. So it's a very much a contingent right. And he said to the buyer, what did he say? If my mom comes and protests my sale of this, well then lo muftsina lach. So I'm not going to save it for you. Meaning, I really don't have any rights to sell this. And if my mom protests, then tough luck on you. Okay, meaning you're not going to get anything because she has the rights to it. I don't really have any rights to sell it. So shchiva ime below irara. But it turned out that the mom, after already, presumably the dad had died, the husband had died, and so as a result, the mother was entitled to collect the ksuba, but she had not done so. So it's basically the ksuba document is effectively a creditor right, and it's like transferable 100%. So. And she dies without actually collecting it and without complaining that her son had sold it to somebody else. And now the son comes and complains because now he has effectively inherited it from his mom. And so now the son says, hey, well, my mom didn't complain, but now I'm going to complain on her behalf. Okay, well, very nice of him, and kind of like a little underhanded, right? So Saba Rami Bar Chama Lamemar Ihu Bimkom Imekai. So originally, Rami Bar Chama was like, well, he does stand in the place of his mom, and his mom would have the right because he specifically withheld from the buyer the right for his mom to complain, and so maybe he has now that his mom has died. He has the derivative of that right. But Amrle Rava said to him, no, that's really not fair. Right? So it is true that the son didn't guarantee the buyer against a complaint by the mom, but Achrayas Didei, Milo Kabil, how could he not have guaranteed against his own right to complain? Meaning, by definition, right? That by definition, we've got to have some aspect of a guarantee by the seller to the buyer that the seller himself is not going to complain, and so as a result, he does not have to return the funds. So we are picking up again. We're now at the bottom of Tzadik Aleph on Bet, and we just dealt with a case where a man sold his ksuba to his mom's ksuba, sold his mom's ksuba, and said his mom could come and protest, and then his mom passed away without protesting, and now he wants to try and take it back. And Rava pointed out that doesn't make any sense. We're not going to let him protest in his mom's place because he was the one who sold it. So Amar Rami Bar Chama Ruvain Shemakar Sadal Shimon Shelo Bachrayas. So let's talk a little bit about the sale of fields. There are two different ways that I can sell you a field, Stan. I could sell you a field and say, listen, I'm not taking any responsibility. You need to do the research on who else has responsibility for the field and who might have claims on the field. And if you, in fact, lose the field because I owed money to Mark and Mark comes and takes the field, tough luck. That's one way to sell it. Of course, you're going to pay a lot less if I sell it that way. The other way to sell it is if I say that I'm going to sell it to you with achrayus, with responsibility, meaning that if Mark were to come and utilize the fact that I owe him money, and say, David owes me money, he doesn't have any cash, I want to collect from you. You bought this field after, very important, after I made my loan to David. And so as a result, I'm going to want to collect from you. And so as a result, Mark takes the property away. If I have guaranteed you if I sold it to you with achrayus, with my own responsibility, well, then I will owe you back the purchase price, or potentially even a higher price if the price went up. And that was the basis. Let's say I lent Mark lent me $100. I sold you the field for $50, and the price went up to $100. So now Mark comes and takes the field as the $100 because I owe him $100. I owe you $100. I don't owe you just $50 because that was the original value of the field that you bought from me. I owe you the $100 because the field went up in value. Okay.
It's the same if it went down.
And if it went down, if the value changes, it's on the buyer. He would lose the, I would only owe him the amount that Mark effectively collects from it. Okay. Yes, Mark.
Lose depreciation.
Yes, he could potentially lose the depreciation, but the appreciation, I would still owe him for it. Okay. So so now again, let's deal with the case detailed. So Reuven shemachar tzadel l'Shimon shelo ba'achrayus. So Reuven, so we'll just use with people around the table because that's always the easiest. Okay. So James sells a field to Stan with no responsibility. He is not going to pay Stan if one of James's creditors comes forward and tries to take it away. All right. Now Stan says, you know what? I'm gonna sell it. I'm selling it back to James, but I'm going to sell it with responsibility because effectively, what you're doing, right? When you paid a low amount when you sold it, when you bought it from James, because you were buying it with no guarantees. But James now wants to buy it with a guarantee, and so as a result, he is willing to pay you more. So you're going to make a profit on it. But what you're really doing is you're effectively selling to James an insurance contract.
Correct.
Right? You sold to James an insurance contract. So now what happens? And now one of James's own creditors comes, and he takes the field from James. So Mark, who lent James $100, which is the value of the field, is going to come and take the field from him. So Dinahu de Azil Shimon umafatzile. So in fact, Stan is going to need what's going on here? What's going on? Oh, he's giving you $100. Oh, okay. All right. Just to pretend. Okay. No. All right. So okay. So so in the end, Stan is going to be responsible, is what the Gemara begins with, even though it was James's own creditor who comes and takes, because again, remember, it's Stan sold it to James with achrayus, meaning I take responsibility effectively for any way that you could lose the field. And so as a result, now with it, Mark takes the field from James, Stan's going to owe, you're stuck. So the Gemara is going to object to that. So Amrle Rava Nehid achrayus to Alma Kabbalah. I can understand that Stan takes responsibility for some third party taking the property from someone out there in the world. But Achrayus denafshe mikabel alei? Is he going to take responsibility for James's own lenders? That doesn't make any sense. So as a result, we're going to say no. So again, back to the stale. James sold it to Stan with no responsibility. Stan sold it back to James with responsibility. Mark takes the field away from James based on a loan that was made to James. So we're going to say at the moment now, James does not get to collect from Stan. Umoda Rabba, however, agrees that James would be able to collect from Stan. If instead of James having this field on his own originally, if James had inherited the field from someone else and umakro the Shimon below a price, and then sold it to you, Stan, without responsibility. Also, Shimon umakro the Reuben price, and then you, Stan, sold it back to James with responsibility. V'asa ba'chov diyako, and a creditor of the person that James inherited comes and now takes it, because now Mark is not a lender to James. Mark is now a lender to the person that James inherited from. And now, instead of collecting from the rest of that person's estate, that estate is gone, and now Mark is coming to collect from James. Well, you've guaranteed that property against its claim from anyone other than a creditor of James. And so as a result, the Ketarif Lemine, and now Mark has taken the field from James. So you, Stan, are going to have to make James whole. So my timer, because Balchov to Yaakov, Kivalchov to Almadami, right? The creditor of the person from whom James inherits, that is like a creditor that's out there in the world. That is not, and so as a result, the bottom line is what we're seeing here in both of these most recent cases is that if you are the buyer of something or you are the seller of something, then you can't be the cause of the other side losing, right? So if I, all right, and so as a result, even if I give you a guarantee, even if the buyer or the seller gives a guarantee, we're not going to allow that person to undermine the transaction. So, all right, so now those are the first two cases. So now case number 3. So Amar Rami Bar Chama, so Reuven Shemachar Sada l'Shimon ba'Achrayus. So now James sells it to Stan with responsibility, with a sense of responsibility, meaning that if somebody takes it, if Mark were to take it from Stan because of a loan that James had and he had a claim on the land, so then James would have to pay Stan back. And but then turned out Stan didn't have the cash on hand. And so as a result, he says, listen, let's turn the amount of money that I owe you for the field into a loan. So essentially, I'm holding the field. I, Stan, am holding the field. And you, James, are holding an IOU for me. Okay, so that's the situation. Umeis Reuven. And so now,
He has a collateral and a debt.
What?
Collateral and
He has collateral and a debt, and you have a guarantee and a piece of paper. Exactly. Okay. Umeis Reuven. And so now the person sitting in James's seat is the one who passes away. So va'asa ba'chov de Reuven v'katarif la mishimon. And so now we'll have James now be the inheritor here. And so now James is coming. I'm sorry. And now Mark, who lent money to James, is now coming to try and collect the field from Stan. Ufaisi bezuze. And now Stan says, listen, you're owed $100. Here's $100, and everything is good. Okay. So again, James sold the property to you, $100 property. You gave James an IOU of $100. Mark now is owed $100 by James, and he comes directly to you and tries to take away the property. You say, here's $100. And so as a result, you go away, you've been paid. Okay,
He's been paid.
he's been paid, exactly.
I owe Stan $100 and he owes me $100.
Exactly. But there's a very important thing. So now the issue is where do James's inheritors stand in this process? And that's what we're going to look at now. All right. So Zinahu to Amrile b'nei Reuven, the children of Reuven, the children of James, Anan can say to Stan, Anan mitaltale shavet avun kabach. Our father left you movable property, meaning you owe us a debt. You owe us money. You don't owe us property, right? The property belongs to you. You owe us money. And umetaltale diyasme lebalchov lo mishtabde. So the property, the movable property of an estate is not claimable. You are not able to claim against movable property, and this is a basic principle in sort of monetary policy within Judaism. Is that when only real estate, when it passes down to the next generation, is assumed to be collectible. That basically we assume that anybody who gets movable property can hide that movable property. And as a result, creditors never assume that they are going to get paid back with movable property. They will only assume that if the debtor dies, that they will get paid back with real property, through real property. You might sell the real property and then give it to them, but they will only be able to claim against real property. Now, we saw yesterday that there's a mitzvah that if let's say a family only inherits movable property, there is a mitzvah for them to use that movable property to pay off the debts of the parent. But there is no legal obligation. There's no lien on the movable property. And as a result, if they don't, they have not fulfilled the mitzvah, but they're not stealing.
Movable property, once again, is fields and.
No, movable is this. Anything
yeah.
that can literally be moved.
Gotcha.
The one thing that can't be moved is this building. This building can't be moved, right? The land that this building is on can't be moved. That is
Movable is.
movable. Exactly. Movable means movable. All right. So so now so as a result, so the heirs of Reuven in this story, who is the original owner of the property and is the holder of the IOU from Stan. So his inheritors say, listen, you, Stan, when you gave the money to Mark, you were giving him our money,
Children's money.
the children's money, and you don't have the right to give him the children's money. And so as a result, Stan is still going to owe the children the money. Okay, so Amar Rava. So Rava says, "Ipikeach idach." One second. If Stan is clever, there's a way that he could save himself in this situation. What does he do? Magbi lahu nahalu ara. He actually goes ahead and he gives the land to Mark. Okay, he gives the land to Mark, and so as a result, he now is owed the $100 from the estate, and you owe the estate $100, and those two will offset, because here now you are giving real property to Stan, and so as a result,
The debt is no longer
the
mine.
debt is exactly
It's his.
right. Well, you still have the debt, but now James is
debt.
well. You transfer the property.
Okay.
You transfer the property, but
Build my debt.
you fulfilled James's debt.
So Mark is gonna try to, James is gonna try to collect from.
No. Remember, Mark lent James money
Oh,
before. Okay, and now this property is paying Mark back.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now Mark is whole,
You're gonna come to me.
and now you are going to exactly because James sold it to you with achrayus, with a guarantee. So you now have a claim against James, and of course James has a claim against you, and those because you borrowed money from him, and those are going to offset because we're going to
Cancel each
assume
other.
they're going to cancel each other off. Okay. And so now everything is fine. And so as a result, and remember, when you gave the property to Mark, that's okay because Mark does have a claim against real property vis-a-vis James's heirs. And so as a result, that will work. And now what can you do after you've given the property to Mark? So exactly, Bahadar Gavaminayu, and then you can buy it back from Mark. Exactly. The Rav Nachman, the Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravuha, Som Shagavu Karka Bachovas Avian. Right? If orphans collect land for a debt owed to their father, Baal Chov Choser Begova Osamehen, a creditor can collect it back. So essentially, what's happening is you're effectively returning the land to James and getting back your IOU. James is paying the land to Mark, pay off the debt, and now you're buying the land from Mark as a new transaction. And so it's exactly, well, it's a wash sale, but you end up with the land, Mark ends up with his money, and James's heirs end up with nothing. So
there's an issue. In the first case, we said it wouldn't work because he gave him money.
he gave him money as a payoff of the loan.
But you said that money really belongs to me.
Well, exactly, that money really does belong to you.
But also you said, I'm assuming not paid with.
Mark assumes that he's not going to be paid with.
I also have an IOU. Shouldn't my
But your IOU is with Stan, who's alive.
I know.
And so Stan is alive.
I understand, but shouldn't I assume my IOU should also be paid with?
No, that's the
And-
point. It's only the assumption is that if you're going to somebody who is alive that has cash, you can collect from cash.
Oh, it's only for.
It's only when it's only the next generation, or or some transferee. That's where we worry about it. So
You go back to the original debtor.
exactly, you are that the original debtor has to pay from anything that they've got. Exactly. Thank you for helping me clarify that. So that's exactly right. Okay, so next case. So Amar Rabba Ruvain Shemachar calls Dosav l'Shimon. So Ruvain says all of his fields to Shimon. The Chazar Shimon Omachar Sada Echat l'Levi. So one field Shimon sells to Levi, and now the question is, V'asabachov de Ruvain. So a creditor of, so again, James sells it to Stan. Stan sells one of the 10 fields to Mark, and now I am the creditor of James, and and instead of going to James, who doesn't have any fields, instead of going to you, who have 9 of James' 10 fields, I decide that I'm going to go to Mark and try and take the one field that Mark purchased. So Ratza Mizeh Gova. I can actually collect from whomever I want. I can collect from anybody who's holding the real property. Okay, but the low Amran El Dezavna Paynes. But we're going to assume now there are 3 levels of field that we talk about. There are highest quality fields, average fields, and low quality fields. And when I, as a creditor, I do not have the right in general to take away from you a highest quality field. Now, if you only have a high quality field, I think I still will get paid, but I do not have the right to take it away from you. If there are other fields, I am only entitled to an average field. So the only way that I can go to Mark is if the field that you happen to sell him was an average field. Okay, right? About Zavna Idis Viziboris. But if Mark had bought either a very particularly good field or a particularly bad field, so then Matzi Amarle, and Mark would be able to say to me, I purposely bought from Stan either a high quality field, which you're not entitled to, or a low quality field, which you might be entitled to, meaning you could ask for it, but I purposely got it because I was leaving the average fields with Stan. So I was making this purchase in order to not be the one to be collected from. All right. So as a result, this Nami low Amran L. Okay. And now not only that, but even if Mark got an average field, Namilo Amran Ela Delo Shavik Inis Kavasa, that it's only where Stan did not retain basically a similar average field. So let's say there were 10 fields, 5 awesome fields, 5 that were the top quality, 4 that were really low quality, and 1 that was average. And then you sold that average one to Mark. In that situation, I could go to Mark. However, in any other situation where you have another field that's just like it, well then, Aval Shova, as we turn to Tzadik Bet Amabet, see it's a very short top. Bainanis de Chavasa, Matzi Amrale, Hanachti Lacha, Makom Ligos Himenu. I, Mark, left you at Stan's. He's saying to me, I left you an average field. Go collect it from Stan. So the point of this Gemara is that if I am a creditor of the person who's holding a field, I, in general, need to go to the person who bought the field directly from my creditor, from my debtor. Okay, from my debtor. So if I'm owed money from James and James sells the field to Stan, I need to go to Stan in the first instance. The only way that I can go to somebody that Stan sells to is either he sold everything, then I'm definitely entitled to go to the person, or where the only field that meets the average requirement, or that is sort of like maybe even the best of the average requirement, you sold to Mark. And so as a result, the point is that I shouldn't lose. The point is that I shouldn't lose because you made the additional sale. But if I'm not going to lose by going directly to you, so then I should go directly to you to make my collection. Okay.
But Stan only has a very high quality field.
Yes.
Mark has 9 of the other 10 fields.
Then I would be going to Mark. Because in that situation, right, the point is Matzi Amr like, right? So as long as Mark can make that claim that either I bought this field knowing that you had better rights with Stan, or I bought this field and left you fields with Stan that you should be able to collect from, unless he can make either of those claims to me, I get to claim, I get to take it. They're not quite the same, right? The first one is if he buys a high or low quality field, so then he has an absolute bar. And if he buys an average field, so then as long as there's another average. So now next case. So Amar Abaye, Reuven Shemachar Sada LeShimon Ba'achrayus. So Reuven sells a field to Shimon with a guarantee. Ba'asa Ba'achov de Reuven, and now the creditor of Reuven comes. The Katarif Lamina, and he comes and he takes it away from the buyer, from Shimon. The Dinahu, the Azul Reuven Umafatzilite, right? So we know that Reuven has to make the buyer whole, make Shimon whole. The low matzi amrla, like, and he can't tell the creditor can't tell Reuven. Okay, wait a second. I'm sorry. I apologize. So now, the Azel Reuven Umafatzi, like, let's do people again, just again to make it a little easier. So again, James sells the field to Stan with a guarantee. James owes Mark money. Okay, and now Mark is going to claim the land away from Stan. James has the right to get involved in that litigation. Okay, that's what this is saying. The Azul Reuven Umafatzile, he can go and try and save the field. So let's say he negotiates a better deal. You don't get to say, you know what? I actually wish I hadn't bought this field. And the field everybody agrees is worth 100. I'm going to just go ahead and give it to Mark, and now I'll get my $100 back from James. Rather, James can negotiate with Mark, and let's say Mark agrees, I don't want the aggravation of going to court. I'll take $90 on my $100 debt. And so he gives him $90. You can't say, James doesn't have any rights in this litigation. Mark is claiming for me. Okay. Below Matzi Amar Alay, La Bal Dvarim Didiyu. You can't say to James, you're not part of this matter, right? Shum de Amar Alay, because James can respond, Dimapakat mine. You are right, alehadar, right? What Mark claims from you, you're going to claim from me. So as a result, I do have a stake in this litigation. And so this is another interesting issue that we have in in U.S. law. So okay, v'ika de amri afilu shelo b'achrayas nami. And frankly, some people say that even if James sold that original property that now Mark is trying to take from Stan, even if he sold it without responsibility, James may be able to get involved in litigation. The Amrlite, because what can James say? Lo nichalit tehevuli le l'shimon turo omis alai. I don't want Stan to be angry at me. And so as a result, that in and of itself could constitute the right to a sufficient right in the litigation that James would be able to get involved in the litigation. Okay, so Amar Abaye, Uvain, Shemachar Sada L'Shimon Shelo B'Achrayas. Now we have again, Abaye adds the last of our cases. Reuven sells a field to Shimon without any kind of guarantee. Yatsu Alav, as we turn to Tzadik Gimel Amid Aleph, Asikin, and now people are complaining that Reuven really never owned the field. So Ad Shelo Hechasikba. So as long as Shimon didn't actually take an act to complete the transaction, so again, so James is trying to sell a piece of property to Stan. And Mark says, James, you don't own that piece of property. Well, if Stan hasn't yet completed his acquisition of the field, meaning taking an action on the field to show your ownership, so then Stan could say, oh, thank you for saying something, Mark. I don't want this property. James, it's back to you. I don't have to pay you. However, once you take possession of the field, you don't have the ability to go back on it. You owe money. You owe the money that you agreed to pay for the field.
The transference of money in action.
The transfer of money is not an action.
So if he already paid
He could have already
come
paid
back to you
and come back and
So
ask you.
what constitutes the sale is consummated?
You going, I believe actually here's a Rashi. I believe that
I have to physically be on the field?
One second. If the Rashi says, let's do the Rashis here. So Achelo hefsik ba yacholach. So this, however, this is a conditional im lo nasan mo. So if he did give the money, then he also can't go back on it. So if you gave the money, you can't go back on it. So ein yacholach. So chakarka nikna bechazaka ki right ki amrle chazak bekani yeshim machzikin miyad. Because there are people who take the property immediately and then pay the money later. And once you take the property, then you are obligated. And here, as a note, it says, that demonstrating ownership, like locking it, or getting into the field if it's locked, or fencing the property, doing, or even potentially just walking around the property. All of those could be potentially actions that you could take. Certainly working the property would also, I think, be an action that would be sufficient. So, all right, so Eina Yacholachsabo, Mishum de Amrlai, because what can James say to you? Chaitza de Kitre Savart Vikablil. You knew you were getting this property without a guarantee, and so you knew that you were buying a bag full of knots, essentially, right? That's the translation, meaning that is exactly, you took the chance and you are going to have to deal with the consequences. So at what point is the field considered as if it was taken possession? Right? So if you walk the borders, so and there are some who say that even if James sold it to you with a guarantee, and now Mark comes and says the property really doesn't belong to James, that also, you don't have the right to back out. The Amrle, because James can say to you, Achave tirfach, show me the documentation. He could say, actually, I guess to Mark, show me. Oh no, he could say to you, Stan, show me your collection document, meaning v'ashalim lach, and I'm going to pay you, meaning I've guaranteed you. So you don't have anything to worry about here. You've agreed. You've already done the acquisition, and so as a result, you don't get to back out now. You have to go through the litigation, and only when the litigation is done, that's when I will owe you. And so as a result, that is those are the additional rules associated with a guarantee. So now we're up to the Mishnah, and we'll be talking about tomorrow, a situation where there are multiple ksuva obligations and not enough assets to satisfy them all. And so if you want to find out what happens in that situation, you'll have to come tomorrow.
Unhappy.
I don't know. I did not have the time to figure that out. I will see whether I can figure that out, God willing, for tomorrow. So there you go. That'll also be a
That's your
surprise for
enticement
tomorrow.
for tomorrow.
All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful day.